Hello everyone, this is the finale of What If Naruto is the Perfect Assassin, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Sakura dragged me all the way to our very first arena back in our team days and finally released my arm before turning to face me with a stern expression. The others caught up and looked warily from her to me until Gaara decided to break the trance. So what do you have in mind as a test? I don't know. She shifted her weight and put her hands on her hips. I felt Narelle slip herself under my arm and smiled when she cuddled closer. You guys could pit the strongest of your village against him. Kizaru stood near me like I needed him as a bodyguard. That would be the Hokage. And Temari rolled her eyes because she was explaining the obvious again. They won't pit their Hokage against him in fight because they fear her safety all the time, and he is an assassin who has not shown his face in the village for almost 3 years. I'll do it. Kakashi snapped his book closed and slipped it away for later. We didn't respond for a while but just stared at our pervy sensei while Kizaru and Narelle circled him slowly. Going different directions at the same speed, they both returned to their starting position, nodded to each other. I give him 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. Yeah, minute, tops. Any higher? No way. He did just get out of the hospital. Narelle was being the sensible one while Kizaru was using statistics of my other fights. Of course, only I seemed to understand what they were saying with the choppy statements. Kiba leaned over to me. What are they doing? Sizing him up to see how much of a one-sided fight it will be. He made an "oh" shape with his mouth before doing a comical double take with a smile towards me when he let my meaning soak in. Kizaru came up behind me and put his large hand on my shoulder and pushed me forward while Kakashi was already a safe distance away from the group, and from what it looked like with his mask he was smiling at me. What are you smiling at, sensei? You're about to get your butt handed to you on a silver platter by me of all your students. Yes, I am. And I will not hold back anything against you, Naruto. Haha, you expect to just use all my skills on you. Not happening. Oh, why? 'Cause then it would be over even faster. He smiled and disappeared with a tiny wave goodbye. I didn't move. I closed my eyes and took deep, slow breaths. Sakura stepped forward, worried. Naruto. Narelle shook her head. He's all right. I channeled my chakra at a comfortable steady rate, expanded my field of vision, until it ranged into a 1-mile radius. Jumping up and slamming down on my knee a few feet away, I revealed Kakashi's small hideout underground and had him pinned under my knee with a kunai at his throat. He peeked up at me from his cool earthy position. Well, I guess I lost her. I smiled back at him and lent him my hand to get him up on his feet. Yeah, you kinda did. I brushed some of the dirt of his back and put my hands behind my head. 45 seconds. I turned to see Sasuke staring at me. That took you 45 seconds to take down Kakashi. You couldn't do that 2 years ago. 2 years ago I was taken from Konoha to be trained in an assassin's corps, and studied and trained like crazy to get where I am today. Narelle smiled and punched my shoulder jokingly before slipping it around my waist. I mimicked her as Kizaru leaned himself against a tree. Glad you did something while you were on vacation. Jiraiya stated glumly from his perch above Kix's tree. Said man began laughing. No, he didn't get a vacation. It was almost the polar opposite for him, especially the first few days. I looked over at him. You mean the ones when I was in the beginning levels? Yeah, all because you didn't tell Master that you were a higher level than you appeared. I didn't trust anyone at the time and didn't want him to know about my past relationships. Yeah, and now you two are as close as you two can get when it comes to rank. I know, but what does he mean by that, Naruto? Gaara had maintained his silence, but it broke under the pressure of his curiosity. I guess now is a better time than none. You see, I earned my way through many levels and after that MA. Who's MA? Oh, Master Assassin is MA, and he let me do the last 3 tests to become his apprentice and, well, I passed them. Jiraiya jumped down from his tree. When you left you couldn't even form a Rasengan. So, he raised his eyebrows expectantly and I sighed in return, lifting my hand palm up and channeling my chakra the way I had been taught. The deceivingly small blue orb appeared quickly and swirled with perfect precision and search control. Well, looks like you got that form down. Narelle nudged me and my attention was hers. Show him. I smiled gently at her and she blushed at my gaze. I did as she requested and, moving my arm farther away from us to keep her safe, added my wind style forming the Raisin Shuriken. I could feel Kakashi and Sasuke analyzing it with their Sharingan, but I knew that they couldn't copy it. It would take too much chakra for them to try. I stepped away from her and she watched after me with suspicion before I winked at her, causing her to relax. I love her too much to see her worried over nothing. Flexing my fingers a bit, I reared back and threw my enhanced weapon, letting it fly and destroy some of the trees in its path before making a single hand sign. The Raisin Shuriken exploded to great size and tore many trees out of the ground and incinerated them with the force of wind that I had placed into it. Making a second hand sign, I returned it to a medium-sized orb and held it there while I form a second Rasengan and added my water style to it. The blue globe changed into a clear one and its once defined edges rippled with saturated energy. Its shape continued to morph until it was flat and disc-like. Rearing back once more, the disc sailed through the air and expanded much larger before it collided with the Raisin Shuriken in a tsunami of ice shrapnel. Turning back to the stairs behind me, I made the last sign and eradicated all of the ice with a surge of wind throughout them. Walking slowly back to Narelle, the snow fell with such gentleness that one would never have guessed what stages of destruction had created it. A regular old Santa Claus, huh? Kizua slapped my back in approval. Hey senseis. They looked over at me. Does Lady Tsunade mind snow? We're not sure. Why? I pointed towards the village and they all sweat dropped. The whole village was in submission to the magical white flakes as curious villagers stepped out of their homes to see what unnatural weather was occurring. Why haven't you shown us this before? I've never done it before. The large group looked at me. What? It was all up here. I tapped the side of my head. We watched in silence as the snow quickly formed a thick layer on the ground, trees, and buildings all around. The tantalizing crunch under our feet was wonderful as we made our way back. I had taken off my jacket and wrapped it around Narelle to keep her from being cold, convincing her that with the power of the fox, and another explanatory tangent, that I no longer got cold as long as I had a normal amount of chakra in my body. Upon entering the gates, one of the ninja there told me that the Hokage wanted to see me. Instantly fear spread through my body. That lady, like most girls, was terrifying when she was angry. But my fear wasn't needed because when I opened the door to her office I was captured in a hug by none other than Tsunade herself. Tsunade Bar-chan. I can't breathe. She ignored my words. How thoughtful of you. Bringing snow in time for winter and Christmas in the land of fire is one of the best gifts ever. She finally let me go and looked at my face. Oosh, no problem. Another person was hugging me now, but not as bad as Tsunade. I turned to see Shizune smiling warmly for her thanks. When I was released I didn't move. What is it, Naruto? No more hugs. I relaxed. Okay, good too, tackled from behind. Narelle wrapped her arms around my neck. Hugs for Naruto-kun. I laughed at her innocent expression and pulled her into a tight hug. Thank you, Narelle. After we left to dinner, me and Narelle split from the group and I took her back to my place. So glad the committee believed me, sort of, when I told them I knew who my father was. In short, they gave me the place where he and Mom lived. My Narelle made cocoa and snuggled up to me on the love seat under the pretense that it was just to keep warm with all my destructo snow outside, making everyone in the village light fires and stay indoors. She said it with the cutest accent too. I love her so much. But lately I haven't been telling her everything. The fox was absorbed so he can't be it, but something has been bugging me for a while, something dark. I felt her cool hand slip into my shirt and rub circles on my chest. Naruto. Earth to Naruto. I opened my eyes and cast them at her. Yes, love. She brought one of her hands to my forehead and her face grew stern. Are you feeling all right? You seem kind of warm. I laughed and took her petite hand in my own. This has always been my normal body temperature, sweetie. She gave me a pout face which confused me to no end. Why do you get to be all warm and comfy all the time? We both knew what that meant. Another lovely night. Time skipped 3 days. Kizua and I were walking out to the gates to get any letters or notices for Tsunade, but were really hoping to hear from M.A. He said he would allow me time to heal and then come get us, but it's been a long time and we've heard nothing. There wasn't much there, so Kizua offered to take it in for me and let me walk away. he always knows when there is too much on my mind to function properly. The forest outside the walls was just what I needed to relax as a chill flurry of snow went by. Poor Naruto. So worried about his master. Pathetic fool. A strange Scottish accent came through the air, strangely familiar. I looked through the bare trees and finally sensed him far ahead of me. Odd. It sounded like he was right above me. I debated with myself internally whether going without my gear would be fine or would this person present a big enough threat. After a minute or two I choose to walk on and meet my threat. Ah, you've finally appeared, laddie. I was beginning to fret. Your concern is touching. How do you know me? He staggered and put his arm over his heart as if in pain. Your lack of knowledge is killing me, boy. Oh. He was hiding his chakra from me and kept a good distance between us. He was cocky, arrogant, and annoying. I turned to leave only to find him reappear in front of me once more. Let me pass. Oh no, no. I just found you again. Can't let you go just yet, laddie. He began his approach, but I backed up too with every one step he took. Who are you? He stopped, smirked by what I could tell under the shadow from his hood. You'd think that one would remember a guy that he threw through a few walls. Realization blinked through my mind. Zata. Boyo. Finally a smidgen of common sense. He disappeared and before I knew it another name was added to the list of people who have stabbed me with some weird injection. Poison won't work, Zata. He turned away as my vision began to fade and, pulling off his hood, he smiled to me. Never said it was poison, laddie. The ground was icy and wet this time as my mind and body shut down under the drug. The darkness was everywhere. In front of me and behind, around my legs and arms, circling around me and yet perfectly still, loud and quiet. I could understand but couldn't. The darkness knew me but I had no memory of it. The darkness lapped at my mind and touched things that I had buried and locked over and over. Bringing my attention to strong fears I never imagined I would have to face again. Where was I? Was I dead? No, I was breathing, sort of. It was raspy. I was cold and wet and the icy sensation made me flinch, the snow. But, I shouldn't feel the cold, my chakra was still going strong so I shouldn't feel the cold, but, I did. The darkness around me took shape and formed a box or a room of sorts. I heard a small child's laugh reverberate around the room but saw no child near me. Slowly rising to my feet I was pleasantly surprised to know that I was still strong on my feet and the coldness left me. The giggle came again and I tried without success to pinpoint the source but it was getting closer and closer. Until a young boy came into view. He was not terribly young by his appearance, 7 or 8ish in my estimation, and with him he carried a doll that seemed to resemble a person, but I couldn't get a good look so I had no idea who. And his whole face seemed light up with joy even though the only cause for joy in this desolate and lonesome place for him was the doll. I watched in silence, enjoying the reprieve from the fear that came from an unknown source in intervals, not wanting to disturb the young boy but at the same time I needed to know where I was. He came closer and took little notice to me until I mustered my voice. Where am I? He stopped, glancing at me and smiled before continuing on. I tried again, and repeated myself, where am I? This time he looked at me and approached slowly. His eyes were pale, like a blind man's color, or lack thereof, and I had no idea if he really could see but it seemed that he could. He looked intently into my face and the paleness faded from his eyes. Will you be my friend? He stepped forward and gave a small lopsided smile. Will you be my friend? What? I took a step back and everything within screamed at me to stay away from him, that he was dangerous and to be avoided at all costs. He held the deceiving appearance of a child, of innocence, but within he was something dark. You do too. I brought my attention to him as his smile was gone and the paleness was completely gone also. He appeared, not angered, but displeased, and his eyes were blackened to the point that it would seem that they had never existed in the first place. Excuse me. Don't act all high and mighty, Naruto. You feigned innocence all your life. I felt my eyes widen at his words before I squinted them in distrust and caution. What do you mean? He scoffed as I searched my mind to see if I had spoken my thoughts, but I hadn't. You took the appearance of a boy all your life up until recently and yet on the inside you were a demon. I gasped at his statement and knew that the scars of my past were making themselves known to me. My face betrayed my strains of my attempts to hide my emotions. Sadness and fear filled my mind and the darkness fed off of it. A familiar giggle came to me. The boy was holding up the doll which took shape of Kakashi with his mask up and Sharingan glaring in its crimson red. You know him, correct? Do what you're told or I will poke his eyes out. His voice came out in a growl but I had no intention to answer. He had his back to me and I took a glance at myself. No weapons or defenses, just what I came out into the forest in. Answer me when I speak, demon. I covered my ears from the intense volume and screamed my answer over the thunder around me. I'm not a demon. His laugh became deep and scratchy and the fear from the unknown rammed itself down my throat as 1,000 other voices pronounced as a demon. Some I knew and others I had never heard in my life, but they all yelled the same condemning announcement, demon, 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 demon. Even with the knowledge that my speaking and screaming would not affect my situation at all, I screamed in such a way that I didn't know I was screaming until I felt my lungs beg for air. Which I gave readily only to have my throat strain itself again. The fear was like a mule kick to the chest, a hammer to the throat, painful and relentless. The darkness sprouted claws which raked my chest, my neck, my legs and arms suffered the claws that seemed to be trying to restrain me. Naruto. Her voice was like an angel's and I was the mortal condemned to hell hearing a possible savior call out my name. I felt myself tense and hold on to the echoes, but they were quickly fading. I grappled the last notes and the fear struck again then, my chest and throat lost all feeling before returning to pain and I tortured my throat again. A cracking noise made me look down where I was standing. The floor was cracking like brittle glass in white streaks of light. Yes, the light was shattering this terrible dream. Deep down something stirred in me and told me that it wasn't a dream. You weren't supposed to feel pain in a dream, but I didn't care at the moment. There were stressed voices above me, whether they were loud or quiet, I didn't care. I could hear them and they were coming closer. The darkness was gone completely but the pain of shifting from the dark to the light was immense and I cried out the best I could with my suffering throat obviously drawing much attention from those above. Naruto. Kakashi was the one grappling my shoulders and holding me while I screamed more and more until the light faded to a tolerable tone. I was free from the dark chamber but the fear followed me and delivered its last blow. My eyes flew wide open and all around me jumped back in surprise as I lurched myself into a sitting position with a gasp and stared with wide-eyed horror into nothingness. Naruto. Lay down, kid. I felt his touch on my skin and shuddered violently through my painful gasping, but I obeyed feeling exhausted with my raw throat not making my breathing easy. He patted me reassuringly and spoke gently to me. It's okay now, you're safe with us. Do you remember where you are? I focused on him for the first time and saw the worry in his eyes. Konoha. He exhaled deeply as I continued to gasp for air. Where's the little boy? He cocked an eyebrow. Little boy. Was there a little boy there, Kiba? No, not that me and Akamaru found. Just Naruto in the snow. Kiba's brown-haired head came into view as he looked gently into my eyes. What did he look like? I'll go back. I grabbed his arm tightly and felt the fear in my eyes reflect on his face. No. Kakashi pushed me back down onto the bed but I held onto Kiba's arm. Don't go after him. If you see him don't go near him, don't talk to him. Okay Naruto. He freed his arm and held my hand calmly. I won't go near the little boy. Promise me. I looked around for the first time at the cautious faces around me that I held so dear to me. All of you promise me to stay away from the little boy. Kiba nodded for them and himself before turning away to make room from someone else and I relaxed a bit. I heard her approach and felt myself smile the best I could manage with the memory of what had just happened as her angelic face came into view. Her soft hands found a cloth and dabbed my forehead dry. I realized I was shivering and drenched in sweat. Hey love, how are you feeling? I just nodded my answer which made her furrow her eyebrows. Do you remember what happened? The fear was in the shadows of my mind, watching me and waiting for my answer as it slipped a bit of itself into my mind, enhancing the memory. I shuddered and began to tremble again. So dark. Huh. The trembling increased. Naruto. It was so dark there. Sasuke, Sakura, and Kizua were closest to me in a flash. And the little boy, I swallowed harshly as the trembling grew worse. He would laugh. The doll came to mind and I gasped, Kakashi. They made room for him. I'm here Naruto. What is it? He's going to hurt you. His doll looked like you and he's going to hurt you. But my sensei was shaking his head slowly. Nobody going to hurt me Naruto, I'm fine. The darkness lapped my vision from me and I felt myself slip under my exhaustion and into a dreamless sleep. Time skip 1 week. The dream no longer haunted me as it had that night, but the fear came without the dreams. I still had told no one of this, but the first time I awoke screaming and my throat raw, so I had to come up with a solution: duct tape. It was annoying, but it worked. I would wake up screaming into the tape, my throat torn apart, but the sound could not escape. The mornings were worse. It wouldn't come every 2 hours like during the night, but when it did come, it was much, much worse. I willed myself not to scream, but let out a moan of suffering and pain, and usually it would drive me to my knees and wouldn't let up for a few minutes. How I kept it from my friend and senseis this long was a complete mystery to me, but I knew they suspected something. I didn't scare easily, and if I ever did get scared, it must be for good reason, but there was no reason, or no reason that I could see. POV change, not Naruto, XD. Ever since that night, he's been hiding the rest of the story and getting almost no sleep at all during the night. Sasuke was irked and worried as he leaned against the countertop of Kizuna and Narelle's apartment talking about their friend. The group from Suna had left a while ago, and Gaara had asked for continual updates on Naruto's well-being, and now they were 3 people short of finding out what was happening to their friend. I say that we just drag him out of his normal routine of laying low and bring him here for a good long talk. Everyone turned a glare to him for such a blunt and rash thought. What? It would work, if we let him know that we can tell something's up with him. He would crack and tell us. Sasuke nodded slightly with agreement, and Hinata gaped. No, we can't just force him to tell us, he has to want to tell us. She was using a tone that implied that she wanted to believe that Kix's idea wouldn't work, but deep down she knew that it would. Maybe we could just ask him and he'll, tell us. She shrugged at the end, hoping it to sound more convincing than she did. Sasuke shook his head now. We should do as Kizuna says, grab him and make him talk. He started for the door. I'll go get him. In his current state there won't be much fight in him. And he left. No more words filled the air. Sasuke had taken them with him out the door and after Naruto. Uzamaki compound, Sasuke, SPOV. When I got near to the door, I froze. Something was off. There was no light on in the shadowed home, but the windows were open and the breeze was billowing the curtains. Is Naruto even awake? Easier for me, I guess. I pulled out the pin I kept with me from Sakura to pop the lock, but paused when a new thought came to my mind. I turned the knob hesitantly and found that it turned easily, and the door creaking open forebodingly, and a strange low moan crossed with a muffled wail was coming from inside the cavernous rooms. Stepping carefully inside, I kept silent as the strange sound continued its haunting echoes through the home. I searched every room and finally came to Naruto's bedroom with the door closed. My hand froze before the knob once again as yet another wail cut the air. It was very loud now, and it was inside. I burst through the door, not knowing what to expect, and definitely not expected to see Naruto thrashing in his bed with tape over his mouth. He was the source of the noise, and he was asleep while doing it. The tape was placed directly over his mouth to keep his wailing at a low. I picked my shaking friend and shunshined he spelling out of his home and into the apartment I had left. Subconsciously wondering why I didn't just do that to get to Naruto's place first, I walked slowly into the living room where the others sat waiting patiently for my arrival. Naruto's body tensed and thrashed as another wail from him behind the tape turned their heads and wide eyes towards me as I approached. Naruto. Narelle stood from the couch and motioned from the others to do the same to make room for our wailing friend. Placing him gently on the couch, I peeled back the tape and he gasped desperately for the oxygen that he couldn't have gotten quick enough through his nose. When his breathing slowed to a gentle pant, we noticed that his lower lip was quivering, and once more he tensed and released a scream. It pierced and remained at a note of suffering and torture before dying out into more gasps for air. I'm no demon. He was muttering in his sleep, and whatever it was must have been terrible. Why the tape? I don't know, it was on his mouth to keep him quiet. Signs of forced entry. None that I saw, but he left the windows open so it wouldn't be forced. Kizuna fell silent once more as he paced the floor in thought. I spoke my mind then. I think he put the tape on himself. No, he wouldn't do that. He knew the dream was coming, and he knew that screaming would alert people, so he taped his mouth to keep it quiet and keep his secret under wraps. Shikamaru stole my thunder in one sentence, but the thunder was killed by our friend releasing a cry of his suffering in a world that only he could see, or was there a way that we could see it too? Ino, she turned to me, already knowing my question, could you maybe? Of course. She got into her stance, made her hand signs, and was gathering her chakra when Kizuna interrupted her concentration with a hand on the shoulder and a gentle nudge back. No, you don't even know what I was going to do. I recognize the hand signs from my studies. Only those from the Yamanaka clan have this unique ability. So you do know, why you stopping me from helping him? If I can go in and figure out what's going on, then we can stop this. Kizuna held her angered glare but weakened against her years of practice. Alright, she started once more, but he held for one more warning. Naruto doesn't get scared easily. In fact, it takes a lot to get him to shudder even a little. For him to be screaming like that, he turned over to the blonde who held an expression of agony. I would not want to see what was going on in his head. I'm going anyway. He held up his hands in surrender as she once more got ready and with the command entered the realm of Naruto's mind. Naruto's mind, Ino, SPOV. I found myself in darkness and a silence so quiet I covered my ears to avoid being deafened by it. The darkness was alive and moving all around me, studying me and looking for my weaknesses. You can't break me. It froze but regained itself quickly. Where is Naruto? A small child's innocent giggle turned my attention away from the darkness and I looked all around for the child and I found him. Standing a short distance off was a young boy holding a doll, but his eyes were hidden in unknown shadows as a creepy little smirk crossed his face. He approached me calmly and kept the doll close to his chest. He's busy now. He looked up at me for the first time and I became scared. His eyes were the purest and most beautiful color of cerulean blue I had only ever seen once before. They were Naruto's eyes. He smiled as though he knew my thoughts and walked into the distance before placing his hand on what I assumed was a wall. It slid, revealing a, somehow, darker black room where a wrenching scream rammed its way into the room I resided in currently. Naruto, I charged after the small child, throwing aside all concerns I had of getting hurt and Kix's terrifying warning. I passed through the wall and saw Naruto hanging on the wall. His hands being held up with a large serrated blade and his legs held down the same way through each knee. His blood was everywhere and he was charred and cut like someone who's been through years of torture. The little boy went up to him and put a finger to Naruto's slumped over forehead and whispered something to him. Almost instantly, he began to scream again and struggled desperately to escape the grips of the blades that were piercing him. Naruto. I rushed over and pushed the boy aside and started to yank on the blade in his leg. You can't have him. A raspy voice startled me in my desperate work. The boy had risen and now glowered at me with ink-black eyes. He's going to be my friend, not yours. I was going to answer but Naruto moaned, low and pained, bringing me back to the more important job of freeing him. I tugged and struggled but the only success was more pain for the blade's prisoner. He's mine. A sharp pain ripped through the side of my face and my shoulder met the back wall with sickening pop. Ino. Naruto was trying to escape now and the blades were starting to slip away from the wall. Hang on, Ino. One of the blades in his arm clanked to the floor and he ripped the other one free before moving to his legs. The world was going dark, which was weird because that's how I got here and my shoulder throbbed. I heard his feet rushing my way in a choppy rhythm and felt his hands lift me up before I was completely unconscious. You have to get out of here, Ino. And no, I'm not leaving you here to this. It's almost over, but if I wake up before you get out you will be stuck here. Now go. I managed the hand sign and returned to the world of light, but as the world was fading away I saw the little boy behind Naruto with a branding iron. Real world. No. I felt cool hands on my shoulders as my mind returned to the others. Ino. Hey Ino, it's okay, you're safe now. I struggled against the reassuring touch and forced my eyes open and threw myself towards Naruto, but found myself held back. Let me go. I thrashed until I felt a piece of gauze touch my cheek. Once the hands left I dove towards Naruto whose expression was pained. Wake up, idiot. His eyes flew open but they were glazed over. No. You have to wake up, Naruto. Ino, chill. Shikamaru would say that but the white blazing brand was fresh in my mind. He gasped loudly but no scream, just a silent gape to the ceiling as his hand moved to his heart and gripped tightly. His eyes clenched themselves once more and when they reopened he was wide awake, shivering in the shock that his body had received. Narelle looked at him and put a hand on his forehead and he moaned long and low. Sasuke sat on the armrest near his head. Hey Naruto, what's up? He stared at me before realizing where he was. Sasuke. He started to sit up but stopped halfway, wailing in pain and clutching his chest. Ino. He turned from his pain and saw me standing watching him and sighed in relief, "You're safe." He winced and groaned again, arching his back in pain before pulling his shirt open, revealing a large burn over his heart. The brand from the dream had left a mark in the real world. Sasuke helped him into a sitting position slowly and he looked to us. "Guys, I'm scared. I couldn't leave the sofa of Kizuna and Narel's apartment. None of them would even let me sit up. The burn on my chest concerned Sakura the most, and with here being a medic ninja I knew that it probably wasn't in the most ideal spot." Sasuke sat on the armrest like a lion guarding his cub. Every once in a while he would turn his dark eyes on me and touch my forehead to keep me in check with reality. But none of them could stop the fear. It lurked through my mind. I could feel its claws walk across my, supposedly unbreakable, mental barriers like they were but pine needles on the forest path. Such an easy task that one doesn't even take notice that the needles are there. It would growl and laugh and whisper but never roar or screech and howl. It was keeping low along with the battering ram that would normally slam into my chest and throat more often now. My body would tense like it should but nothing would come. Sasuke took notice of my caution and the way I struggled to keep my eyes open. "Hey," he was whispering softly like a concerned search brother does to the sick younger one, "Hey, are you all right?" "I'll be." A painful cough caught Sakura's attention and brought her towards me. "I'll be okay." She placed her pale hand to my forehead but obviously my appearance didn't match. She removed the sheet that I had on and pulled open my shirt carefully. The burn was too severe to come in contact with anything at the moment, so there were no bandages. Her hands were icy to the touch as she got as close as she dared to the wound and gently poked and prodded the tender area around it. Once coming to close, I sucked a gasp of air down at the shock of pain that ran its course through me. Everyone froze around me to check on my latest matter of suffering. "I don't like how it's looking." Her voice was void of all emotion, the voice she reserved for severely injured patients. She looked into my eyes and touched my forehead again. Frowning, she felt my chest. "You're very warm." She started to take the covers but I shook my head weakly. I was freezing. "You want to try and sleep?" The trembling returned as the beast in my mind caught her words and shook itself into my burn. Grunting with pain, I clutched it blindly and caused more pain to access my body. Strong pale hands pulled my hands away from the wound and Sasuke held tightly to them. Panting, felt myself slipping again and once more I fell into the horrid darkness. Mindscape. The little boy was still giggling, and when I had fully entered his realm I felt the wounds that had not followed me out return to me once more. My knees threatened to give out and hands begged for mercy I could not give. "Why did you leave?" I spun as quickly as I could manage and saw his terrible face looking intently into mine as he clutched tightly at the doll. "We missed you." He smiled and reached for my hand, but I wouldn't allow him to touch me. Instantly the kind facade was gone. That was rude. His inky eyes returned and the doll once more became Kakashi. All at once the predator had found the wounded lamb that it had lost. "I gave you the break from my pet. And this is how you treat me." The reprieve from the fear was his doing. I flinched away but met a wall. Curling into a protective ball I tried to block him out. The darkness hesitated, and I dared a glance. His eyes were once more pale and the grin back on his face. The doll remained the same. My pet obeys my every whim. When I say sit, it sits. When I say rest, it rests. When I tell it to attack you as you are awake, it brings you to the floor in a bloody, quivering mess. I sat on my knees now staring at this child. A slave to darkness and fear, a slave to a torturous, little blind child in my mind. Reality. No. The others looked to Sasuke, who was shaking Naruto's limp form frantically before Kizuna got to him. "Stop it. That's not good for him. He can't be asleep." They managed to get the frantic Uchiha off of Naruto and hold him down on a chair. "Ino." She looked at him with worry swimming in her eyes. "You saw what was going on in his head. You of all people know that he shouldn't sleep." She remained silent but stole worried glances to the blonde, who was starting to mumble in his sleep and twitch. Narelle was next to him with a devastated expression. "Oh Naruto." A slight whimper escaped the blonde and his expression became stressed as he struggled against the evil possession in his dreams. His face contorted and he allowed his back to arch as he fought a losing battle against an unknown enemy. A pitiful wail escaped the blonde and a few harsh coughs racked his body, until a sliver of blood trailed down his chin. Naruto. His struggles seemed to pause and the strain gone from his face. Naruto was listening, clinging desperately to her words. "Say something else." Neji nudged her arm before debating his chances of actually seeing something with his Byakugan. Naruto, can you hear me, dear heart? His chest heaved, skin paled farther than it had been before, and an icy sweat broke across his whole body. N.A. Narelle. His voice was hoarse and faint as he tried to peel his mind from the hellish alternate reality. You're there. Yes. Yes, I'm here, Naruto. Can we help you? A desperate look crossed his face. Find Zata. Unknown location, third person. Your mission was a success. The redhead kneeled before a shadowed figure. Uzumaki feels the terror I bring him. I, my lord. The man began to pace in thought. Zata watched carefully. You have done well, my apprentice. He turned to the kneeling teen. Rise and take your rightful position at my side. As he extended his legs, he felt a cloak slide over his shoulders. Uzumaki carried the demon for so long. The cloak fell back and a strong but withered face emerged. Zata attempted to hide his shock, but the man's smirk told him he had failed. It is time he atoned for his sins. Time skip and POV change, 3 days and Konoha. You sure you're ready to start eating this stuff again? Naruto didn't blame them for their wariness, but the nightmares stopped coming and the child slowly vanished. Narelle's voice disintegrated uneasily as she spoke to him throughout the dream, which had only just recently ended completely. Sasuke was very skittish as to have seen Naruto lay so still for the course of almost 3 complete days. The fear still came at random intervals and some attacks were stronger than others, but he was feeling well enough to get out of bed and visit his favorite restaurant. The staff greeted him with elation, and once they were reassured that his strange and sudden illness had passed, they served his meal for free. Grinning like a child as he slurped the noodles happily, his friends watched his every move while they quietly ate their meals. Well, the soft familiar voice turned their heads to smile at the one-eyed ninja as he entered the room with a wide eye. Naruto is back from the dead. The blonde smirked at his sensei as he spoke with his mouth full. I wasn't dead. He swallowed and smiled, just really close to it. Narelle slapped the back of his head while Sasuke and Shikamaru muttered their classics, troublesome. And Barker. Besides, I didn't even think you noticed I was gone, Kakashi-sensei. The ninja feigned pain. That you think that way of me is insulting. He became serious in the quick change way that he has. I have been extremely worried about you, Naruto. Have the dreams stopped coming? Yep, though sometimes, Naruto didn't miss a beat as Kakashi's question surprised some of the others. The attacks still come. The response was a nod. Silence filled their conversation until Sasuke looked up and caught Naruto's attention. So, blue gaze was on him. Who's Zata? I lay awake on my roof, naming certain constellations in my head. Everything was quiet and still. I had come up here after excusing myself from the dinner Hinata had made for all of us. The fear was something that hit periodically, and I liked to be alone when it happened. It was a weakness. I could hear Kiba and Neji fighting again over whose senses were more keen. I allowed myself a quiet chuckle as their voices rose higher and higher. Ino's voice now surpassed as easily, telling them to shut up with some threats tossed in here and there. I knew he was waiting for me before I got up here. He wasn't as quiet as he thinks himself to be. It's strange, I sat up to see him and his orange book, our group's relationship with each other. I smiled at his observation. Yeah, they're great in their own way. I smiled and laughed again, even if they can be slightly abusive. He laughed with me now and the silence set in again, crickets, occasional owl, and Kakashi turning the pages of his little book. You saw the attack. Yes, Naruto. The book clopped shut. They worry me greatly. Do you know what is causing them? Fear. I answered that question myself fairly often. Fear of what? I don't know. I stood up and looked back to him, which is why it doesn't make sense. I started to pace. I can't just be afraid of nothing. He nodded and followed my pacing with his gaze. Makes no sense. There must be something deeper. Are you sure this is fear? What he said stopped me. I wasn't absolutely positive it was fear now. The nightmares stopped coming, so I naturally assumed that the attacks were just a remnant of them, but were they for sure? Naruto. You're right. Huh. What do you mean? I'm not sure that it's fear anymore. I could feel it now, the strange sensation that I had thought was fear. It wasn't screeching unintelligible noises inside my head, but words of warning. It's a warning of something. Like an instinct. Hit the nail right on the head, one thing you must have inherited from the fox. It all made sense then. Attacks before was fear from the dreams, but now it was different. But of what? What is coming that I can prepare for? Morning, Narelle POV. The day couldn't have been more beautiful and Naruto seemed in good spirits, but as usual looked on edge. He was still wet from his shower, with only pants on, in the kitchen when I awoke to the smell of bacon and eggs. I tried to be quiet and sneak up on him, but he was better than that. Without turning away from the omelette he was making, he laughed. Good morning, Angel. I gave up and just wrapped my arms around him from behind. I didn't know you could cook, Naruto-kun. He cocked his head toward me. Only if I want to, dear. You like pancakes. I smiled and buried my face into his back and inhaled his scent. I could feel his laughter through the muscles that I held on to. I cared so deeply for him, and I know he felt the same for me as his arms pried mine open enough for him to turn around and wrap his arms around me. So, I looked at him closely. About those pancakes. I smiled and rubbed his whisker marks. I would love some. So would we. We both jumped at Sasuke's voice speaking for the others behind him. Naruto and I both smiled and watched them all laugh and smile at the position we were in. My Naruto kissed my forehead gently and turned back to the cooking, adding the batter to the skillet and flipping the young pancake skillfully into the air. Sitting with the others, we joked and laughed with each other until Naruto brought bacon, eggs, and pancakes with syrup to the table. The conversation paused while we ate and enjoyed the food. So Naruto, Neji started, who is Zata? Zata is someone from the academy that I haven't heard from in years and never thought I would ever hear from again. Haha. Naruto threw him through like 6 walls when that red-headed idiot threatened Narelle's friend. Naruto wrapped his arm around Narelle and pulled her close. You would have done the same thing, Kizur. If I could have gotten there as fast as you did. Well, why is he back now? And how the heck did he find you? I have no idea, but he's still pretty irked still about that day. The blonde paused. He's the one who started the whole nightmare thing, by the way. He muttered the last part as though he didn't find it important. What? Almost everyone stood up and yelled at him. How could you keep that bit of information from us? It doesn't matter who did it. He met the fiery gazes with his calm blue one. All I know is that I'm going to kick his butt when I get the chance. The table slowly went back to eating as the blonde refused to answer other questions they posed and all was silent at the table. Naruto finished and cleaned up his dishes before walking out the door and leaving the group to think about his strange behavior. POV changed. Naruto. I didn't feel right back there. The hammer came down on me as soon as I mentioned Zata, and it hadn't held back on the force either. I knew that Zata had something to do with the instinct, as me and Kakashi had decided to call it, kicking in repetitively to my great discomfort. The fear was caused by something, but of what? I had no idea. I didn't like it, feeling afraid. I never have liked it. It reminded me that I was admitting to my own mortality. I strolled through the streets absent-mindedly as I pondered my thoughts, desperately wishing for someone to listen and not think about just Konoha, but me, and wasn't really watching where I was going. As another strong blow made me gasp at the strength of it, but it brought me to my senses. I was standing a roof of near the cliffside part of our wall. Right in front of me was the Hokage Memorial, and facing me, with his stony eyes watching me as intently as I always imagined he would if he were alive. The 4th Hokage, my father. Huh. I looked into the carved features of the cliff. You were always there even when I didn't think anyone was. The fear subsided into an agony that was always there when I thought about what my family would have been like, or at least what he would have been like. I wish you could be here for me right now. The sadness spread further through my heart as I stared on, Father. It was the first time I had acknowledged it out loud. I belonged to a family. My name meant something. The tears came without warning. I felt an arm around my shoulders, and I knew already that the 2 men closest to my dad, Jiraiya and Kakashi, were there for me, and knew that my pain ran deeper than I let on. He was a great man, Naruto. Jiraiya. You will be greater. Kakashi. The burn on my chest was paining me greatly. It started the other day when I reminisced at my father's carving, and Jiraiya and Kakashi comforted me, but now it was like burning into me like nothing else. I've always hated burns, not something you can wrap up like a cut or a gash, can't support them like a break, utterly stupid and pointless type of wound, injury, things, ouch. It's throbbing now as I walk through the cooled streets in the dawn of Konoha. I preferred dawn and nighttime so that I didn't have the sun blaring down, so I could take these long walks through the town. I sensed their approach before they were even in a 2-mile radius to me. They were worried because they hadn't seen me since yesterday, and me with my whole burn getting worse situation am supposed to stay under one of my friends' watch at all times, but where was the fun in that? Neji and Hinata couldn't see me because I cut myself off from a traceable amount of chakra, and Kiba couldn't find my scent because I was able to stop that from being traceable a long time ago. Now the real question, should I tell them where I am and go back, or keep up this wonderfully entertaining goose chase? Sighing deeply without thinking, I swallowed harshly at the yelp of pain tried to announce itself. My chakra spiked to numb my senses to the terrible sensation, and as I rested myself against the wall of a building I sensed them closing in on me. Naruto. I flinched at her loud voice. Oh, shut up. I'm not that loud, sheesh. Sakura crossed her arms defensively and glared at me with a smile on her face. Haha, I know, Sakura. Sorry, I didn't mean it. She uncrossed her arms and turned serious. Where have you been? I dropped my gaze. We freaked when you just disappeared. I'm sorry, Sakura, she saw my eyes travel back to the monument like yesterday. The pain of the loss I suffered came back, bubbling up like a fountain and welling into my whole being as the blood fled my face to aid my aching heart. I felt a hand on my shoulder and I didn't flinch away. I didn't understand why I was feeling this pain again now, but I just couldn't drop it. Sasuke supported me as my knees started to weaken. You gonna be alright, bro? His words were heard, but I couldn't process them fast enough. I was aware that the others were around me and being cautious not to break my trance. You know, their eyes were on me, but this was for Sasuke. I don't get it. I lowered my eyes and sank to the ground, concerning the others by sighing deeply before flinching and grabbing my paining mark. She was next to me in a second, her warm hands pulling mine away and sitting by me. Narelle snuggled my hand and kissed my cheek as I regained my breath. Take it easy, Naruto-kun. She took my head and leaned it to her body. Just be quiet now and rest, love. The embrace. So full of love and passion, I couldn't take it right now. I lifted my head and kissed her full on the lips for a few seconds before using my father's move to place myself in the outlying forests. The air seemed wilder here and the area trembled with life. Why am I on the edge? What possessed me to pull away from Narelle like that? My chest throbbed once more, and finally fed up I stamped to the river nearby and tore off my shirt and looked to the evil torturer. Red and puckered, glaring and raging, the burn greeted me with a vengeance. When the cool wind stroked the area, it screeched and raged, leaving me gasping on the ground, practically begging the putrid thing for mercy. I blinked and saw myself back in that room and the little boy. He was smiling like always, but he looked different. Weaker, paler, and much thinner. He looked like a dead child walking. When his eyes met mine, I instantly felt pity, which I revolted against. I'm sorry. His voice was weak. After all you've done, now you're sorry. He flinched and the guilt hit me again. I didn't try to pull away this time. He was being completely sincere. You mean that, you didn't? I'm sorry. He was crying now and ran towards me. He almost collapsed halfway, but I caught him and lifted his tiny chin and looked into his drenched eyes. He wept as he tried to stammer out an explanation and soaked my burn with chilled tears. Cautiously I wrapped my arms around the small frail boy. Slowly he calmed his breathing and had finally slowed to a more normal pace. He turned his pained eyes to mine and bore into my soul with them. Forgive me, Naruto. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. His tears had soothed the burn, and now that they had stopped coming, I, once again, felt the pain. I was brought back by his plea of desperation. Please search, brother. It caught my attention well. Search, brother. He looked at me and gave a weak smile. You know what happened the year you were born. I winced at the memory, but he went on. If they had survived that day, then they would have had me. I widened my eyes and gaped. I'm the brother that you never had. He became fuzzy and we both looked around. He looked to me. I'm fading now. I really am sorry, big brother. He touched a tiny hand to my chest and numbed me to the burn. The pain stopped. The memory faded. My baby brother was being controlled by Zata when he lost worth in his eyes. That vile man destroyed what little I had of him. I will avenge the last link to anyone I could say I was related to by blood. He didn't truly come into being, but I've forgiven any pain he had caused. The knowledge of our relationship to each cleansed his sins away. Waking with a start, I found myself back on my bed with my hands and feet strapped to the posts of my bed. My shirt was gone and my burn was throbbing with such intensity that I cried out when my gasp from waking entered my lungs. The whispers I had heard around me went silent and the stamping of feet replaced them. My friends' faces peered into my eyes with overwhelming concern. Naruto. Sasuke's whisper was the most comforting sound at the moment. My emotions were revolting within me. My bound hand was shaking as I gripped his paler one and held on tightly. All of their eyes widened as I felt the warm drips slide down my cheeks. As much as I fought and struggled against them, they kept coming and freezing my cheeks and neck. I was aware of how warm I became as the tears for the last of my kin chilled me. Naruto, are you alright? I tried to speak my answer, but my throat was arid and torn. All that emerged were deep, painful coughs that only worried those around me. He killed him. The coughing came again and tortured my lungs, chest, and throat, as me Angel, Narelle patted them all with a damp cloth. You have been thrashing and screaming for 5 days. The restraints are here to keep you from hurting yourself and us while we were trying to help you. I breathed deeply and rubbed my eyes on my shoulders. She put a hand on my cheek and used her thumb to gently wipe away what I missed. I've never seen you like this. I gave a small smile towards her concern. Sata killed him. Sasuke looked back over to me from the couch that he and Neji dragged in. What do you mean, Barker? I was going to glare, but the thought of the small frail child, I shuddered instead. My little brother is dead now. I felt the anger welling up and I closed my eyes. Sata killed him. I felt my body change with my anger, and when I reopened my eyes I knew I was using demonic chakra. Narelle gasped and stepped back as I rose to my feet. Snapping the restraints like thread and growling to myself, I strode and looked out at the storm that was raging outside. I will return the favor personally. My anger was not leaving me as I continued to stare out into the storm. My burn caused me great pain, but I forced myself to remain silent. I had just suffered a more painful loss than that burn could ever hope to compare to. Another flash of pain seared through me as both assailants struck. I flinched and finally released a grunt that only hinted at the agony I was in. Oh, good. Kiba sighed with a tinge of relief. Not thinking perfectly straight, I turned from my stance and glared towards him, questioning his meaning. Hey, easy man. I meant that I was worried that we lost you to that world of torture again, I growled out loud as I felt my eyes change. I had already explained what had happened in the room, but I had left out my little search brother being the one Sata had controlled. Kiba held up his hands, just worried. Not responding, I turned back to the storm. Lightning flashed incredibly close by and I smirked. The weather was going along with my attitude perfectly. The silence had slid in gracefully once more for a few blessed minutes until... Man, where is Kakashi? Sasuke reclined on the couch nonchalantly. I only gave a glance over and knew that they were trying to distract me. Neji jumped in on their worthless game. He's always late, you three should know that better than anyone. A forced laugh from the others. Yeah, ever since the first day we were assigned to him, he has been, fashionably late, to everything. They kept their little conversation up for about 20 minutes, which did impress me, but they died out slowly to the silence that I gave in return. Okay, Naruto. I cocked my head towards them. Sakura was speaking, we can't make you join the conversation easily. So what's it going to take to get you to be normal again? I held them in silence as I pondered my answer. Blood. They were taken aback by my tone. What? I turned full towards them now. They had managed to suck me into the world again, accidentally. My search brother died at his hands. They all focused intensely. His blood will repay my search brother's death. I knew that I had just worried them beyond what they were before, especially Sasuke. Blood will do nothing, Naruto. I acted like I didn't hear him. I should know that better than anyone else here. I almost killed my brother. And Zatta killed mine. I was unconsciously tapping into my reserves again and felt the changes occur once more. It felt good. I had taken them by surprise by yelling, and I had also revealed what had happened in my latest nightmare. What? His eyes were wide. You don't have a search brother, Naruto. I snarled at the expression of cruel disbelief in his eyes, and the look disappeared instantly. I sat motionless for some time, internally debating whether to include the rest of the story and apologize for my threat. If my parents, I looked down, begging God to give me the strength to pull through with this, hadn't died that day, then the little boy in that mindscape would have been born as my little search brother. Ino snorted. He stabbed you, insulted you, and branded you. How could you call someone like that your brother? The way he died. She didn't meet my gaze that I had fixated on her. Zata had controlled him, possessed him in a way, to do those things to me, but he broke away from the search control and managed to get a message to me that we were. I stopped to breath and regain my bearings. When his usefulness had run out, I was spitting the vile words like I would if I had put crap in my mouth. He killed what was left of my search brother. The last words were spoken with such a bloodlust in my voice that I knew the others shivered. I closed my eyes to block myself from the world. No one moved for an eternity, until she moved and very, very cautiously wrapped her arms around my stiffened form and snuggled her head into the curve of my neck. The purity of her love, the trust and willingness she gave it to me with, it was so comforting to me. Without thinking, I tipped her chin up and gave her a long kiss, forcing the fire of my love behind my lips and hoping that she felt it. A tear slipped down my cheek, shattering on the wooden floor and spreading the pain I felt through my whole life into plain view of everyone in the room. It was the only tear to fall, however, for as long as my friends are near and as long as Narelle's love was the fire in my soul. Then I would never cry again for the pains of my past. I stood with my beloved partner in my arms for the longest time before sweeping her into my arms and plopping onto the couch. Holding her close and never letting go. I promised myself that day that I had broken away from our kiss, before my search brother's death. I shuddered and I felt her snuggle closer to me. She stroked my whisker marks and kissed my lips ever so lightly. Ah, I loved her so. The door opened and closed incredibly quickly. I thought you told me he wasn't moving, but glaring out the window swearing bloody murder. Kakashi was pouring way too much sarcasm into his tone. Finally here. What took you so long, Kakashi? Sakura playfully punched our sensei's shoulder. He became very grave just then, and without looking directly at him I could sense the burden on his shoulders. Kakashi, my voice seemed different, not broken or tired but, ready to hunt. What happened? Narelle got off the seat and allowed me to get up. Walking to my teacher I looked into his eyes. He flinched. There's no hiding it from you. His eye became wary as he avoided my gaze and looked upon everyone in the room. Just be careful. The door. I strode towards the wooden framed door and swung it wide open. The storm was brewing and was going to hit hard. Other than that, nothing. I turned back to Kakashi, who was watching me with an intensity that I couldn't understand. Kakashi. His eyes refocused on my face. They had been watching my hands. What is it? I don't understand. A full wave of his scent assaulted my senses. He was here. So close, so alive. I think something in me snapped because I fought it. I fought the anger I had suppressed. I thought I would hold it back until I saw his wretched face. I was wrong. Naruto. Sai was holding Ino, who spoke my name, and broke the last barrier. The fire of all my pain and anger was released. I flinched and felt my knees shake and quiver. Red energy swept about my body and I was empowered by my fox. My canines were enlarged, eyes are glowing red, nails were now claws and my whisker marks had multiplied. I headed for the door. No weapons. Kizur threw my swords towards me and I slid them on. Don't really know if I want this to be clean or not. I shunshined out of my apartment and on top of the Hokage building. Rushing through the hand signs, I sealed all the doors and windows. I overlooked the whole village. No one else needed to invade. This battle was personal. POV changed Kizur. We could see him standing up there, lightening behind him. His eyes were closed and breathing very, very slow and even. A loud bang aroused a cry from many in the room. Zata stood dangerously close to the window. He was holding his wrist. Naruto had locked everyone in and him out. He yelled something but no noise came forth. Narelle gasped and pointed to Naruto. His blazing eyes were visible from here, creating a frightening appearance and contrast to his silhouetted character. We saw Zata turn to where we were pointing and step back. Naruto was standing right next to the window. His teeth were bared and his glowing eyes created shadows across his face, the perfect killer. Zata threw a blade but Naruto's sword, enveloped in wind chakra, slashed the weak metal in half. One phrase of Naruto's I managed to pull through the barrier. Ready to die, followed by a long animalistic growl. He became a blur as did Zata as the two zipped in and out of our view. The storm came then, rain and lightning everywhere as Naruto steadily won his fight. He wasn't using his sword in a way that I had imagined possible. Using the wind chakra, he extended the point of his blade to such a fine point that he was able to cut through chakra itself. Zata was slowing, no longer able to speed across the tops of buildings. He settled for random close-distance shunshins around the perimeter of the building we were in, Probably hoping that Naruto's barrier would fall and the opportunity would present itself, I laughed to myself as I watched my friend hunt Zata like a battle-wizened alpha. Never losing the trail. Taking his time, but so ready to go in for the kill. Zata would die tonight. POV changed Naruto. Zata. Foolish, thick-headed, cocky Zata. I laughed to myself as he again feebly attempted to try and shake me, but I would follow until he dropped. Then the ground would be stained by atonement and I will have avenged the death of my search brother. No. Stop. He was so desperate. No. 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 But you were so sure of yourself, as all fools are when they don't know their place at the bottom of the chain. I growled again as some fire returned to his eyes. You must die for what you have done. The fire was gone. My rage built up as he continued to fight against me, that he was so full of life while my search brother's soul was forever at rest. He will at least rest in peace. Zata was leaning against a wall, breathing heavily, hardly standing. He looked up at me one last time. My blades were at his throat. You should never look into the eyes of those you kill. I darkened my glare, their eyes will haunt you forever. My blades got closer. Do my search brother's eyes haunt you? He didn't flinch, but a cocky smirk drew across his face. The brat. I kicked him in the gut. Your eyes are already dead to me, Zata. The blades slid with each other and Zata blood shrouded the ground beneath him. His lifeless body fell with a splattering thud and my vengeance was complete. The seals on all the buildings was released and I could hear them rushing out to find me. Naruto. Why wasn't my rage quenched? Where are you? It was still there. It should have fallen with his body. They found me there, staring down at his body. Unmoving, one, worthless body. It's over now. Sasuke spoke everyone's thoughts, but I shook my head. There is another player to this game. I raised my eyes to the heavens. While he is still alive, there is no rest for me. I turned to them. He wants all of us to die. A look of fear struck them, but I smirked in the way I used to when I was younger. Let's beat him to the punch. There is a cycle of life and death to the world. On the day that many are born, many die, and this is a never-ending circle for all who inhabit the earth. Here in PACT we have a cycle too. Yeah, how does it work? One is born as a level 1 assassin, and must live that life by gaining ranks and making a name for themselves. This life could be ended at any time, and unless they had gotten far and become well known, then their works become like dust in the wind. Well, what happens if they don't die? What if they get right at the prime of that life? The master assassin must take that one in as their apprentice. Like you've done with me. Like I've done with you, Naruto. Naruto. The day was bright and cheerful, a complete opposite of the night from 2 years ago. I turned just in time to have Narelle fly into my arms and wrap her arms around my neck to pull me close for a molten kiss. Are you heading for some ramen? Yes, wanna come home? She smiled in that sexy cute way that made me want her close all the time. I'll take that precious smile as a yes. I swept her off her feet in a bridal form and started walking. She was quiet for a few minutes, stroking my cheek until she started looking around at the people around us. They're all smiling and giving you and me little winks and thumbs up, Naruto. So they are. I was so nervous as we neared our destination. Wonder what's going on. I haven't seen Kizuna since you and him went on that camping trip 2 days ago, or Sasuke, or Choji, or Shikamaru, or Sai, or Kakashi, or Jay. How long do I have to keep going? You could have stopped at your search brother. You've been terribly quiet for the past 2 months, Naruto. What's wrong? I looked down at her and smiled weakly. Nothing is wrong, my love. She was quiet but looked down and then straight ahead. I hate it when you lie to me. I'm not. You're nervous and all edgy with me. Why? She pierced my heart with her eyes. I did the only thing I could think of. I kissed her. She pulled back after, breathing deeply. She studied my face and smiled. I just need to ask you something soon. She snuggled closer and breathed slow, and even as I walked slowly towards Ichiraku's become more and more nervous. One villager came up to me with his wife and daughter and smiled. Narelle was asleep and didn't mutter or give any acknowledgement of being agitated from her slumber. One of the children tugged on my shirt hem and I looked down and smiled. Her small pudgy hand held up the purest white lily I've ever seen. The little girl had brown hair and shockingly blue eyes. She smiled up with a few missing teeth as I took the flower and put in Narelle's hair. Good luck, son. The father put a weathered hand on my shoulder and gave it a fatherly squeeze, and the wife stepped forward. You'll protect with all your heart now, little one. Make sure you tell her you love her every day and say she's beautiful when she gets up in the morning with her hair all messy and the imprint of the pillow and sheets on her face. She kissed my forehead and left her hand on my cheek. Their daughter hugged my leg and tugged on my shirt again. Do you wove Hua? My eyes widened. She was so young and innocent, but that was probably why she was asking. Her innocence didn't hesitate for anyone. I love her so much and I don't want anyone else to have her. The girl smiled and poked her heart. Make sure she knows that you wove her with your woe heart. And with that her parents motioned to her and, each taking one of her hands, they walked back the way they came. I had no idea who they were. Why are we not moving? Her voice was soft and I looked down. Her hair was perfect but the imprint of my shirt was on her cheek. How was your sleep, beautiful? She blushed as I started walking again. POV changed Kizur. We were all there waiting at the ramen shop. Poor Jiraiya was having a nervous meltdown over in his chair over Naruto's decision. If that was just Naruto-sensei, then how is Naruto himself holding up? Tuki welcomed said blonde in and a few moments later we saw the manger hold back the curtain that divided this private area from the public one. Naruto stepped in with Narelle in his arms and she looked like she was enjoying it. She looked towards us and frowned slightly. Naruto let her down as she surveyed the group of us all here and the fact that we were all waiting for just them. She turned her heels and glared at Naruto, but he just smirked and stepped forward to pull out a seat for her. What are you planning, Naruto? He said nothing but his eyes flickered from her to the chair and back again. She swayed to one side and put her hands on her hips. I'm offering you a chair. His voice was so quiet, but none of us laughed or snickered. He had good reason to be afraid. This was a very hard thing for him to do. What did you need to ask me? Her expression of stern glaring changed to one of surprise as Naruto knelt before her. Narelle Nazinski, he took her hand in his own. Say you'll share with me one love, one lifetime. Say you'll want me with you here beside you. He pulled a beautiful ruby ring from his pocket. Anywhere you go, let me go too. Narelle was crying. My sister was crying tears of pure joy as she nodded with a smile. Naruto's smile split his face as he slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her in close. Narelle, that's all I ask of you. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him for the longest time before pulling back and whispering something in his ear. I'm so proud of you, Barker. Sasuke ran up to him and lifted him off the ground with a hug. DOBE. I can't breathe. The Uchiha dropped him but Choji got him next. My sister was having her hair played with by Sakura, Ino was all flowers and Hinata was talking all about what colors and foods they should have for the wedding. Narellellellellee. Liana burst through the curtains and caught up my sister in a hug along with the other girls. They were all squealing and giggling with excitement. Kakashi and Jiraiya had managed to get the others to stop trying to kill Naruto and plopped him down in a chair. He couldn't stop smiling and every second he was glancing over to Narelle and her to him. They were perfect for each other. Naruto looked over at me and smiled wider. Hey, guess what? He strode over and slapped my back. You're my new search brother. I mocked horror. I'm gonna die. They all just laughed as I hugged Uzumaki and smiled at him. You'd better take care of her. I haven't done anything stupid yet. He looked to her. I'd better try harder. Time skip 1 week, POV change Naruto. I'm still flying high with the fact that I'm marrying the love of my life in a few more weeks. Although the feeling I had that night still hasn't left and had been getting stronger is worrying me greatly. I decided to head to our favorite hangout and talk this over. I really hated to put a damper on this but it won't leave me alone and I know they have probably noticed it by now. Naruto. I turned to see Sakura and the others running up to me. I started my greeting and almost missed the fact that they weren't smiling. Naruto. Watch out. I didn't register her warning fast enough. A deafening explosion blasted me to the left, and I collided with the building that used to be about 50 feet away and fell to the ground with numerous cracks and pops from my ribs. Sasuke was above me and tried to support me as I tried to rise and I think he was saying something but I couldn't hear anything, just ringing in my ears. He started raising me up and I think I yelped because I felt the sharp grip of pain and he abruptly stopped moving my body and his mouth moved. What did you say? My own voice in my head let me know that I had spoken but again his words were lost to my ears. I can't hear you. Now his brow furrowed and he turned my head from side to side and looked back to Sakura and yelled something to her. She approached and I felt her cool touch to both of my ears, and suddenly the blessed gift of sound returned to me. More explosions all around and civilians were screaming as they ran from the center of town. Biting my lip against the pain from my chest, I rose up and looked around to those around me. They watched with expectant glances. They were all here. Every one of my friends had arrived, including my senseis, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and Iruka, all of them. Even Tsunade was here with that stern glare of hers watching me closely, with her arms crossed over her chest. His scent reached me and I looked around. Where's who? Naruto? Kizuo looked confused as I felt my eyes widen with the realization of our major enemy was. I swallowed hard and felt the anger welling up within me at the betrayal I felt. Naruto. They all took a step back. Master. Narelle looked into my eyes with such a shocked expression. He's the one who. Movement behind her caught my eye and I moved as fast I could. Pulling her behind myself and putting my palm up, I let the kunai pierce through my flesh and my own blood splatter my face. Ripping it out without a thought as the adrenaline fueled my system, someone began clapping from above our heads, and there he stood. Hello, Uzumaki. He smiled, a smile I used to trust. Seems that you have let yourself slip there a bit. I thought I trained you better than this. He made that disappointed clicking noise with his tongue and leapt down right in front of me. I placed myself firmly between him and my friends. He twirled a kunai and I growled as I felt my eyes change color, teeth and nails grow, and stance change to something more animalistic. I never thought it would be Uma. I spoke with a harsh snarling voice. Why would you do this? Ah, Naruto, you were never able to not trust me. He smiled and laughed lightly as he shook his head. I was the one who found you, hoping you would serve me in a submissive way and take a good long time to progress. That way, if it didn't work out, having do missions for my earnings, then I would have plenty of time to kill you off like the others. I snarled this time at the thought of all of the ones who didn't make it back from their missions. And like the others, you willingly began to trust me with everything about you, only you progressed much too fast. I don't know why I wasn't striking yet. I guess I wanted to know what he had to say. So when we got to the final tests, who do you think it was that made sure you heard Narelle's voice with the wolves and allow for you to hit that tree just right? And when you survived that, who do you think sent Taisha after you? But it just wasn't enough. He lunged and instinctively my first thought was to dodge, but there were loved ones behind me. I took the blade to the chest, remaining emotionless and not budging an inch even when he twisted it closer to my heart. You, he looked up into my calm eyes, the storm was hidden beneath, you, I trusted you, but, the lightning licked my eyes and fueled them to burn with a brightened intensity that shocked him. Your treachery will help me end your life. I sunk my claws into his arms that were twisting the blade and pumped wind chakra through them, causing deep gashes to cover his body. He screeched in pain and I knew that there were gashes deep under the skin also. He leapt back and pulled another kunai that met Narelle's stomach. I heard her cry and her body hit the ground, but as I turned to see her lying on the ground, hands around her stomach, it shocked me anyway. Narelle. I cradled her before gesturing for Kizuo to hold her for me. I whispered in her ear, I'm sorry for that pain that I'm about to cause Haim. I reached and quickly pulled the kunai from her body and she cried out again, causing me to wince. Only a little longer. I placed my hands on both sides of the wound and pumped my chakra into her. Immediately it began to heal and her breathing evened out once again. Naruto. I sighed with relief and stared lovingly at her. It's okay, I'm he. Master had me by the throat and plunged a kunai into my spine. Naruto. He removed the kunai and plunged it into my throat at the same time plopping me to my feet. I coughed and an explosion of blood erupted through my mouth and onto the ground below me. They all stood dumbfounded as I fell to my knees. Is this how I will end? I hit the ground and Ma's cruel laughter filled my senses. If it really was as simple as that, then I could've done it without Taisha or Zata. Naruto. Don't die. She rolled me over and to my dismay she was blurred, my vision was already shot. Please. Don't leave me here. New strength filled my body and I knew that I was going to have to use much more of the demonic chakra than I've ever used before, or would I? As Narelle's tears hit my face, I felt something rouse inside of my memory. I had promised myself that I would never pull away again. My eyes widened and she wept harder as Ma continued to laugh. Fool. They all stopped. I will not die. I raised myself off the ground and felt the energy start to rush through my body, healing the wounds and cleansing my throat of the blood. I looked to Narelle and touched her cheek to reassure her. I feel alive when you're beside me. I'll have to fix that. I knew what he would do, but I was faster now. I spun one foot and kicked him through the buildings that were once behind him. Eventually he scrambled back out of the rubble. One of his legs was twisted completely the wrong direction and a gash across his chest. I was saved from my torment. I approached him, preparing a raisin shuriken in my hand. No one will save you from the hell I will put you in. I growled loudly as I swung my palm towards his body. He dodged, but it was futile. I whipped around and threw it. The world went in slow motion as it got closer and closer until he stuck out his arms to protect himself, only to try and prevent the inevitable. It collided with his body and the same affect took him, just like the Akatsuki member. His scream carried out long and loud, echoing throughout the whole of Konoha. Kakashi and Sasuke both used their Sharingan and their jaws dropped when they noticed the twist I'd put on this one. Naruto Uzumaki, you are the number one knuckle-headed maverick ninja. Kakashi spoke with a smile on his face. What? Kiba looked back and forth. What did you do? I smiled and looked to Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro. Something I've never seen in Konoha, and I doubt that you three have seen in Suna also. They looked confused, but Gaara smiled slowly. No, I smiled back at him. No, we haven't. The snow started to fall lightly. Little white flecks of purity falling gently from the grayed sky. How did you do this? I just smiled. Talking of death any more than the battle that had ensued would be too much. Naruto. Her voice naturally tugged my attention, and I turned to face the beauty that wanted to be mine and mine alone. She was smiling gently as she slowly moved closer and closer. I took her in my arms and she whispered the same thing she said to me that day I proposed. Naruto Uzumaki, you are the very air I breathe. Don't you ever leave me here alone. I want to be with you wherever you go also. I pulled back and pressed my lips against hers and held her tighter against me. Narelle Nazinski, I love you so much that losing you would end my own life. Time skipped 3 weeks. The top of the Hokage monument was lined with flowers of the deepest purple and the brightest cerulean blue. Hinata was a genius by using the colors of our eyes to decorate our wedding, bridesmaids wearing the blue and Konohamaru and the guys wearing the dark purple. It was one of the prettiest things I've ever seen. Then she was walking down the aisle, Kizua was holding her arm. My Heim, my oxygen, my Narelle. She smiled as Kizua kissed her hand and left her standing across from me. I love you. She mouthed to me. I love you too. I mouthed back. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.